You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
I wasn't supposed to be home that early. The meeting in Chicago wrapped sooner than expected, which was rare for something that high stakes. We were negotiating a vendor contract that had dragged out for weeks, and somehow, miraculously, everything fell into place before noon. My flight was originally for the next morning, but the thought of sitting alone in a Marriott with overpriced room service didn't appeal to me. So I changed flights and caught an earlier one home, thinking maybe, just maybe, I could surprise Rachel. It wasn't some grand gesture. I didn't pick up flowers at the airport or bring home some cheesy souvenir. I just wanted to be there. To walk through the door and hear my wife say, "Hey, I missed you." That's all. Simple. Familiar. Comforting. The ride from the airport was quiet. I didn't even tell her I was coming. I figured she was at home, probably grading papers or watching one of her baking shows in the kitchen. Rachel always had this habit of multitasking. She'd mix frosting while on the phone with the PTA, scribble notes on student essays in between episodes of The Great British Bake Off. It was one of the little things I loved about her. Controlled chaos in an apron. By the time I turned into our neighborhood, dusk had set in. The streetlights blinked on, casting soft shadows over the trimmed hedges and picket fences. I pulled up slowly, parking by the curb instead of pulling into the garage, something I hadn't done in years. It felt strange, sneaky even, but I told myself it was just to make the surprise better. When I stepped out, I heard the faint clink of glass from inside. The kitchen light was on. A shadow moved past the window, then another. I smiled, imagining Rachel and Abby baking cookies or making hot cocoa. I walked around to the side door, past the grill and the worn-out garden hose Abby kept forgetting to roll up. That's when I paused. I don't know what made me stop, maybe instinct, maybe something in the way the voices inside didn't quite match the scene I'd pictured. I moved closer to the kitchen window, careful not to step on the creaky patch of decking just outside it. I leaned in slightly, peering through the blinds. And I froze. There she was, Rachel, wearing my robe. Not hers, not the soft pink one she always claimed was too cozy to wash, but mine. The one I took on business trips. She'd laughed once, said it still smelled like me. She was barefoot, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She wasn't alone. There was a man in the kitchen with her. He was sitting at the island, casually flipping through a folder. Not one of hers either, it was Abby's. I recognized the glitter sticker on the front. She'd brought that folder home last week for a science project. He looked comfortable, like he belonged there. Legs crossed. One arm resting along the back of the bar stool. And in his hand, God, it was my coffee mug. The best dad, one. Abby gave it to me on Father's Day 2 years ago. Said she picked it out herself with her allowance. I never let anyone else use that mug. Not even Rachel. And now some guy I'd never seen before was sipping coffee from it like it was his morning ritual. Rachel leaned in toward him, laughing at something he said. She placed her hand lightly on his arm, her fingers resting there just a second too long. Her robe slipped slightly off one shoulder. That's when she looked up and saw me. Our eyes met through the glass. For a second, she didn't move. Neither did I. Then, like a switch had flipped, her whole posture changed. She straightened, pulled the robe tighter, turned her head toward the hallway as if hearing something. She said something to him I couldn't make it out and disappeared from view. By the time I reached the front door and stepped inside, the man was gone. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee. Rachel met me in the hallway, holding her phone in one hand and tucking her hair behind her ear with the other. She looked startled but composed, like she'd just run through a script in her head. "Jonathan," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "You're home. I didn't know you were flying in tonight." I nodded, my eyes scanning the hallway, then drifting toward the kitchen. "There was a mix-up at O'Hare," I replied flatly. "Got lucky with an earlier flight." She gave a quick, polite smile, the kind you give a neighbor you barely know. "You should have called," she added, walking toward the kitchen, her tone lighter now. "I would have made dinner." "Didn't want to ruin the surprise," I said, following her. "But it looks like you've already got company." She paused, just enough to register. "Oh, that? No, he just left. That was Ethan. He's a new neighbor. Lives 2 houses down. He's helping me with the design for the school fundraiser. PTA stuff. You know." She busied herself with rinsing mugs in the sink. I glanced at the counter. One mug. The other, the best dad mug, was nowhere in sight. "Didn't know PTA meetings involved house calls now," I said casually, leaning against the counter. She stopped, then turned, holding a dish towel in her hand. "He was just dropping off some poster boards. We started talking about layout stuff. It wasn't planned." I studied her face. She was good at this. Not great, just good enough to pass casual scrutiny. But I wasn't casual tonight. "You said he was from 2 doors down?" I asked. What's his last name? Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I didn't catch it. He just introduced himself as Ethan. Right? I nodded, filing the moment away in that growing drawer inside my head. The one labeled doesn't add up. She kept talking, probably hoping to fill the silence. You've been working so much lately, she said, her tone softer now. I know things have been a little tense. It's just, I don't know. I guess I've been feeling a little invisible. I stared at her. Invisible, I repeated. She looked down at the dish towel. I'm not saying it's your fault. I've been trying to keep busy. I thought about asking more, about the mug, about how she looked so comfortable, about the way she touched his arm. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I kissed her on the cheek, said I was tired from the flight, and went upstairs to unpack. That night, I lay in bed next to her, pretending to sleep. Her breathing evened out quickly, too quickly, like someone forcing themselves to appear relaxed. I stared at the ceiling and counted every little moment I'd overlooked the past few months. That misplaced receipt in her car. Her phone left face down on silent. The random conference in Denver that hadn't shown up on the school calendar. The drawer was getting full. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was no longer the one writing the story of my marriage. I was just the guy watching it fall apart, frame by frame. After that night, something shifted in me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even heartbreak. Not yet. It was something quieter. Something more dangerous. Doubt. The kind that seeps in slow, like a crack in a windshield that starts small but spreads, spiderwebbing through everything you thought was solid. I told myself I believed her. About Ethan. About the PTA. About the coffee. But believing and trusting aren't the same thing. One is polite. The other is real. In the days that followed, I started to notice things, little things I'd overlooked for years because I was too tired or too trusting or just trying too hard to be the guy who didn't make a big deal out of nothing. Rachel's phone was always face down now. Always on silent. That wasn't always the case. She used to laugh when Abby's name popped up on the screen with 3 emojis and a question about dessert. Now, if her phone buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly, turn it over, and pretend nothing happened. Once, I watched her slide it into a drawer when I walked into the room. She said it was because she wanted fewer distractions. We spend too much time on our phones, she told me with that practiced tone. I'm trying to be more present. Right? Present with who? I started noticing the emails too. One afternoon, I opened the home computer in the office to check on a quote from our contractor, the one who was supposed to fix the fence out back. While the screen loaded, a tab popped open just for a split second before disappearing. It was an email still open in the background. The address didn't look familiar. Some odd string of numbers with a domain I didn't recognize. I clicked to reopen it, but it was gone. Deleted. Not in the inbox. Not in the trash. I stared at the screen for a long time. Rachel always insisted she only used her school email for work. She even made a point about it whenever PTA stuff got too chaotic. Too many inboxes, she used to complain. I like things simple. So why was there a ghost email she erased without reading? The new clothes were harder to ignore. Rachel's style hadn't changed much in years. Comfortable jeans, cardigans, those thick-rimmed glasses she always lost in couch cushions. But suddenly, she was coming home with things that didn't match. Bold colors, designer tags I'd never seen her wear, new shoes with red soles she swore were a clearance deal, though I knew damn well what those shoes cost. It's nothing, she'd say with a grin. Some of the local foundations sent them over. Perks of being on the committee, I guess. Charities giving away luxury handbags and stilettos? I didn't call her out on it then. I just smiled, nodded, and took mental notes. I started writing things down. Dates. Receipts I'd come across in coat pockets or crumpled in the trash. Strange appointments in her planner that were scratched out at the last minute and rewritten in different ink. The more I looked, the more it felt like her life had split into 2 timelines. One with me and Abby, family dinners, open house nights, grocery lists, and another that lived in shadows. A different email, different clothes, different explanations. Even Abby picked up on it. We were driving to her piano lesson one Wednesday evening when she turned to me out of nowhere and said, "Is Mom mad at you?" I blinked. "No, why?" "She's just weird lately," Abby said, swinging her legs in the front seat. "Like she forgets stuff all the time. And when I ask her about dinner or school, she says she has meetings, but she doesn't tell me what they're for." I didn't answer right away. Then she added something I haven't forgotten since. She calls me sweetheart now. I looked over. What's wrong with that? She only used to call me that when she was lying about my bedtime. It took everything I had not to pull the car over right then and there. My 10-year-old had cracked the code before I had the nerve to say it out loud. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it creak on every rotation. Like some slow metronome ticking down a timer I didn't know I'd started. Rachel came to bed late. She always did now. Said she had papers to grade. Said the PTA was planning a district event and the Zoom meetings were K*ling her. She'd slip under the covers without touching me, sometimes still wearing her makeup, like she couldn't bother washing off the day. I pretended to be asleep. I was getting good at that. But I wasn't pretending when I remembered something else. Something small. Something old. 2 summers ago, Rachel and I went to Belize for our anniversary. It was the kind of trip you promise yourselves you'll take every year but never do. On the last morning, we'd walked the beach barefoot, coffee in hand, and she told me she wanted to get serious about her art again. It's stupid, she'd said, but maybe I'll open an Etsy store. I told her it wasn't stupid. I told her I'd build her a whole studio if she meant it. She cried, said no one had ever believed in her that way. And now, that woman was gone. Replaced by someone who gave one-word answers, who spent most evenings on her phone in the laundry room, who hugged Abby too tightly when she got home from school like she was trying to overcompensate for guilt. Even the dog didn't act the same around her. Lucky used to follow Rachel from room to room. Now he stayed curled up by my feet. I kept telling myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I was being paranoid. But every night that folder inside my head, where I kept all the unexplained things, grew heavier. Every skipped dinner, every unreturned call, every mystery conference with no mention on the school website. And the mug. God. I couldn't stop thinking about that mug. I asked her about it a few days later. Casual tone. Light-hearted. Like it wasn't driving me crazy. Hey, you seen my Father's Day mug? The one with the blue letters? Can't find it anywhere. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, I think I left it in the car the other day. Took coffee to go for once. I'll check tomorrow. But she didn't check. And the mug never came back. A neighbor mentioned they saw someone leaving our house the week I was in San Diego. Said they figured it was a contractor. New friend? They asked with a wink. I smiled. Lied through my teeth. Said we were getting the guest bathroom redone. But inside, I felt something unfamiliar start to build. Something slow and dangerous. Resolve. I wasn't going to blow up yet. I wasn't going to confront her over a mug or a receipt or the fact that she suddenly had 2 gym bags and couldn't explain why one of them smelled like cologne. Not yet. But I was done ignoring it. Done hoping it would go away. Something was happening. And I was going to find out what. A week later, I came home early again. No warning. No call. Just impulse. I told my assistant I needed a break, shut down my laptop, and walked out of the office. Something in my chest had been pulling tighter every day like a rope fraying under too much tension. I didn't even check the clock until I was already on the freeway halfway across town heading home before 4 p.m. It wasn't premeditated. Not really. But part of me was hoping, maybe even daring, that I'd catch something. That if the lie had a face, I could finally stop pretending it didn't. The house looked normal. Quiet. Just like always. The first thing I noticed was the car. Not Rachel's. Not Abby's. A charcoal gray Lexus SUV I didn't recognize, parked 2 houses down but pulled awkwardly close to our driveway. Close enough that someone might park there on purpose to avoid being obvious. I parked a block away and walked home. Abby was at an after-school robotics meeting. I knew that because I had personally dropped her off that morning. So whoever was inside the house wasn't her. I didn't go through the front door. Instead, I used the side gate, the one that sticks a little at the hinge unless you know how to lift it just right. I stepped into the backyard, boots crunching softly on gravel, and waited. There were voices inside. Muffled. Laughing. Then I saw the upstairs light. Our bedroom window was cracked. Just a sliver. The curtain shifted with the breeze, and through that narrow gap, I caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong, 2 shadows moving too closely. Rachel's voice, soft, followed by a man's. Not a call. Not a TV show. A conversation. An asterisk mate. I climbed the deck stairs slowly, keeping to the side where they didn't creak. Heart pounding. Throat dry. Every step felt like it took a year. I reached the top, rested my hand on the door handle, and paused. I didn't want to do it. God, I didn't want to know. But I had to. The sliding door opened without a sound. I stepped inside, into the kitchen, and didn't even take off my shoes. I walked through the living room, up the stairs, down the hallway that smelled like lavender and dryer sheets, and stopped in front of our bedroom door. The light under it flickered slightly. Voices again. Hers, then his. Low. In asterisk mate. The door wasn't fully shut. It never is when Rachel's alone in the house. That's how I knew she didn't think she was being watched. I pushed it open slowly. What I saw didn't need words. Rachel was on the edge of the bed, hair tied back loosely, wearing the oversized sleep shirt she always claimed was too comfortable to throw away, except she was half out of it now, one shoulder bare, legs crossed toward him. Him. The same man from the kitchen weeks earlier. The neighbor with the coffee mug and the casual smile. He was holding the best dad mug again. Like it was a running joke between them now. His jacket was tossed on the dresser, his shoes off. He sat beside her, too close. Their hands weren't touching, but the space between them was dishonest. Pretend. On the nightstand, next to a half-finished glass of wine, were the printed photos from the trip to Belize, the ones Rachel had promised she wanted to frame but never did. They were scattered, like they'd been rummaging through her memories. My throat went dry. For a second, all I could do was stand there. Rachel looked up first. Her expression changed instantly. Not shock. Not guilt. Just vacancy. Like her soul had already run out of the room ahead of her. The man turned next. He froze, still holding the mug, lips parted mid-sentence. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. Didn't ask questions. Didn't demand answers. Because there was nothing left to say. They had said it all already through the looks, the quiet, the touches, the stolen hours, and planned silences. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. Repeated, practiced, lived in. I turned and walked away. Down the stairs. Out the door. Got in my car and drove. I don't remember much of that drive. Just that I didn't go home. I ended up in the parking lot of a hardware store. Sitting in my truck with the engine running. Fingers clenched so tightly around the wheel my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at nothing. My phone buzzed once. Her name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then again. Then a text. Please come back. We need to talk. I didn't respond. That night, I checked into a hotel on the west side of town. Used a credit card I hadn't used in months. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The image of that room burned into my brain. The mug. The photos. The way her eyes didn't flinch. Sleep never came. In the morning, I went back home. She was gone. The house was too clean. Vacuum lines still fresh in the carpet. Dishes washed. Wine glass gone. Everything reset like it hadn't happened. Except it had. And I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. I found the mug in the dishwasher. Still wet. Top rack. I didn't touch it. Instead, I went upstairs, sat on the side of the bed she'd been on, and looked at the photo frames still sitting on the nightstand. One of me and Abby. One of all three of us at the lake house last fall. One of Rachel and me from the early years, when everything still felt new and wild in ours. I didn't feel anything. No rage. No betrayal. Just a quiet, bone-deep vacancy. That was the day I started planning. Not for revenge. Not to hurt her. Just to take back control of the narrative I'd let her write for too long. That evening, she came home. I was in the backyard, raking leaves like it was any other Thursday. She stood on the porch for a long time before speaking. "Jonathan," she said quietly, "we need to talk." I looked at her once. Just once. Then went back to raking. She took a step forward. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I don't even know what to say." I shrugged. "Then don't say anything." "I'm sorry," she whispered. I nodded. Not in agreement, just acknowledgement. Then I walked past her into the house and shut the door behind me. Later that night, she slept in Abby's room. Said she didn't want to make things worse. I didn't argue. The next morning, I texted Abby. "We need to talk when you get home. Just us." She responded, "I know. I've been waiting for you to say that." I knew then that I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This was real. It had been real for longer than I wanted to admit. And now it was time to stop collecting evidence. It was time to act. The days after I caught them blurred into something quiet and surgical. Rachel barely spoke to me. She moved around the house like a tenant on borrowed time, avoiding eye contact, barely touching anything that was mine. Her toothbrush disappeared from the master bath. Her clothes shifted slowly into the guest room closet. No formal conversation, no confrontation, just a silent understanding that the line had been crossed, and nothing could step it back. But I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns out. What was left in its place was calculation. I spent that first weekend cleaning, not the house but our digital life. Passwords, accounts, shared folders, everything. I changed the locks, then replaced them completely with new smart locks connected to my phone. I installed cameras, tiny, discreet, outside and inside. One in the entry hall, one above the back patio, one facing the street, and one very quietly in the living room. I kept the last one hidden behind the bookshelf, its view framed directly on the spot where Rachel usually sat to text. I didn't ask her to leave. Not yet. Let her think I was spinning, distracted, broken. Let her think I was processing it slowly. The illusion of weakness would buy me time. And time was what I needed more than anything. I contacted my company's security consultant, a friend from my early days in the business, someone I trusted without question. We met for lunch off the grid, at a diner on the edge of town. I told him I needed surveillance and discretion. He asked only one question: "Is this about business or personal?" "Both," I said. He nodded and didn't ask anything else. By Tuesday, my phone had live access to all the cameras. I also had GPS on Rachel's car, not hard to do with the right diagnostic tool. I tracked her purchases through our joint card, but I knew better than to rely on that alone. So I found more. I got into her laptop that week while she was out running errands. Her password hadn't changed in years. Inside her downloads folder, I found files she probably forgot existed: PDF invoices, route confirmations, 2 scanned documents from a storage rental company with a second name attached, Martha Sloan. She had an alias. Why? The next night, I brought Abby into it. She was sitting in the kitchen, flipping through a workbook and poking at her grilled cheese. I sat across from her and didn't sugarcoat anything. I told her I'd seen her mother with someone else, that I didn't know how long it had been going on, but I knew it wasn't just a mistake. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. "I know," she said. "It hit me harder than I expected." "What do you mean, you know?" She hesitated, then reached for her backpack and pulled out a small folder. Inside were *TS pictures of texts from Rachel's tablet that Abby had once used to play games. Old receipts stuffed into a school notebook, one for a hotel on the coast, another for a private P.O. box in another county. A plane ticket stub dated 6 weeks earlier, while Rachel had claimed to be attending a teacher wellness retreat in Tahoe. "I wanted to tell you," Abby said, "but I didn't know if it would just make things worse." She had been protecting me. My own daughter had been gathering evidence while I stood frozen in doubt. That moment changed everything. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore, it was about protecting Abby too. From the lies, from the gaslighting, from the slow unraveling of our family into something unrecognizable. "Can I help you?" she asked softly. I stared at her, overwhelmed. "You already have." Over the next 2 weeks, we worked quietly. Abby had a knack for finding things. She'd grown up in a digital world, and Rachel, arrogant in her secrecy, had left breadcrumbs all over the house. Her emails, cloud backups, even voice memos on her phone where she'd recorded notes to herself. One of them chilled me. "Jason thinks the Belize house should be stocked before the paperwork clears. He says if we time it right, we'll only need a 4-day window. We'll need the insurance policy notarized before." Jason. That was his name. I looked him up that night. Jason Fields. Former bankruptcy attorney. Disbarred 3 years ago for unethical financial practices and asset concealment. 2 failed startups. 3 suspended LLCs. And he was in my house, drinking from my mug, whispering to my wife. The betrayal was no longer emotional. It was structural. Financial. Dangerous. I brought the information to my security guy, who confirmed what I already suspected. Jason and Rachel had created a pipeline. Using dummy corporations and anonymous bids, they were siphoning off insider intel from my company. Strategic leaks. Non-compete violations. A few of my failed bids now made perfect sense. Competitors had undercut us by impossible margins. Jason knew the bankruptcy laws inside out. Rachel had access to employee records, client profiles, even my schedule. It wasn't just an affair. It was a scheme. I found records of bank wires to offshore accounts. One in the Cayman Islands. Another in Panama. Most were in Jason's name, but one wire was made by Martha Sloan. Same alias as the storage rental. Rachel's alias. They planned to vanish. Not just break our marriage, but erase it, replace it with something new, built on stolen money and a falsified death certificate. Because yes, that was part of it too. In a file on her laptop labeled Gala Budget, I found an outline of what appeared to be an accident report. Fake. Typed in a tone that tried to sound like an official police dispatch. It described a fatal car crash. Fire. No remains recovered. She had written her own obituary. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Hurt had given way to numbness. And now numbness had sharpened into something else. Focus. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I upgraded the cameras. I created backups. I started meeting with lawyers, not just divorce attorneys, but asset protection experts, people who specialized in clawing back offshore transfers and exposing shell companies. I also opened a new trust in Abby's name. Quiet. Untraceable. Funded it with cash and liquidated stock. Rachel didn't notice. She was too busy making calls in the guest room with the door locked. Too busy volunteering at a center that didn't exist on any public record. The final step was the car. They had planned a fake crash. She'd even picked the make and model down to the VIN. But I got to it first. Swapped it out. Bought the same car from a salvage auction, rigged it with staged damage and falsified plates. I had a former contact in law enforcement who owed me a favor. The plan was set. She wanted a clean break. I was going to give her one. But it would be mine. On my terms. Because I had no intention of letting her disappear with what she tried to steal, not from me and not from Abby. By mid-March, I had everything I needed. Every lie, every receipt, every click she thought would disappear into the void. I had it documented, backed up 3 times over, labeled and sorted by timestamp. My lawyer said the amount of evidence we'd compiled was obscene in the best way. He kept flipping through the files like he couldn't believe how cleanly it all fit together. But what unsettled me more than the betrayal itself was how long they'd been planning it. This wasn't a desperate fling. It was a blueprint. A long con. Months of stolen time, false identities, and coordinated bank movements designed to leave me hollowed out financially, legally, emotionally. I had the offshore account numbers. I had Rachel's fake identity. And I had Jason's entire professional record, his suspensions, his wire fraud case, and a buried court document linking him to a previous embezzlement ring that vanished just before the feds moved in. They thought they were building an escape hatch. I was building the trapdoor under it. The night before everything broke open, Rachel sat across from me in the living room, scrolling on her phone like everything was fine. Her wine glass was full. Her laugh, when she scrolled past a meme, was light, even charming. It would have fooled anyone else. But I'd already stopped seeing her as my wife. She was something else now. A stranger wearing Rachel's skin. I might go see my sister this weekend, she said without looking up. I nodded. Take the Lexus if you want. That was the car they planned to crash. The one that was supposed to burn on a rural road and leave nothing but scorched metal and DNA fragments. I'd spent a week rigging it, modified the tags, swapped out the plates, even added a hair sample from an anonymous donor and pre-scorched some fabric with a blowtorch. The fire would burn hot and fast. But there'd be no body. Just the illusion of death. She smiled. Thanks. You need the insurance info for it? I asked. She paused. No, I think I have it. She did. I'd watched her pull it from the file drawer earlier that week. She was getting ready to die. The next day, I set the final pieces in motion. My lawyer contacted law enforcement with a sealed statement, everything documented. But I told him not to press charges yet. Not until the curtain dropped. I wanted them to walk into it. Abby was in on it now more than ever. She stayed with a friend for the weekend. I didn't want her near any of this. She'd already carried too much. Rachel left that Saturday morning in the Lexus, saying she'd return late Sunday. She even hugged me tight for the first time in weeks. I didn't hug back. The car had a tracker. I followed her path from my phone, southbound highway, then west toward the edge of the county line. By late afternoon, the car had stopped near a remote patch of farmland known for abandoned barns and brush fires. It was a perfect spot, private, quiet, and far from any immediate help. At 6:14 p.m. I got the text. Made it safe. Staying overnight. Don't wait up. Love you. Then nothing. 2 hours later, a report came through police dispatch, a vehicle on fire outside an old gravel road off Highway 50. No body found. No passengers visible. Just charred remains and burned personal belongings. The car was unrecognizable. But the wallet in the glove compartment had a copy of Rachel's license. A bracelet Abby had made years ago was discovered in the back seat. The investigators called me. I played the part, shocked, quiet, devastated. I went to the morgue. They showed me the wreckage. I couldn't bear to identify it. They told me they'd do DNA testing, but it would take time. And that time was all I needed. We held a funeral 4 days later. Small, quiet, closed casket. Abby refused to attend. Said she wasn't ready. But I knew why. She couldn't cry for someone who hadn't actually died. I gave a speech. I said all the right things. And I meant none of it. Then came the knock. The evening after the funeral, just as the sun dipped low over the lawn and the lights inside our house cast long shadows, someone knocked at the door. I opened it and didn't flinch. Rachel stood there in a windbreaker and jeans, holding a suitcase in one hand and a purse slung over her shoulder. No makeup. No jewelry. Her hair tied back in a low ponytail. She looked relaxed. Smiling. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. I have. She let out a short laugh. Well, surprise. I'm dead. She stepped into the house like she owned it. Like this was all part of the plan. Jason's waiting, she said. Once I grabbed the documents, we're heading to the airport. Belize in 24 hours. I didn't say anything. Just turned and walked toward the back door. She followed. 10 minutes later, we were standing at the farmland, the same one where her car had burned. The air still smelled of smoke and char ash clung to the edge of the grass. She stepped forward slowly, eyes scanning the scorched earth. You did it, she whispered. I can't believe you actually pulled it off. No, I said, voice flat. You pulled it off. I just cleaned it up. She turned to me confused. That's when I handed her the folder. Inside, photos, bank logs, voice memos, everything. Her alias. Jason's disbarment records. The transfer records. The dead car. All of it. You can't use any of this now, I said. I've already closed the accounts. Froze everything. And I reported Jason 3 hours ago. He's not going to Belize. He's going to jail. She looked up at me, finally panicked. You're bluffing. No, I said. I'm giving you a choice. What? I stepped closer. You either go to prison for wire fraud, conspiracy, and faking your own death, or you vanish. For real. Not with a new name and a villa on a beach. You disappear with nothing. No ID. No assets. No claim to Abby. No more Rachel Hughes. Her face crumbled. You can't do that. I already did. We stood there in the quiet. Just wind and cinders. Finally, she dropped the suitcase and fell to her knees. What do I do? She asked. I pulled a metal box from the truck. Inside, a pair of scissors, a trash bag, a plastic bowl. Burn it all, I said. The license. The ring. The name. She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was. Good. Rachel sat on the edge of the truck bed and began stripping her identity down to its bones. The name tags. The marriage certificate copy. A handful of photos. A flash drive. She dropped them into the bowl and I lit the match. The fire glowed orange against her face. She didn't cry. When it was done, she picked up a small prepaid phone I left on the bumper and turned to me. What do I say if someone asks who I am? You say you're Martha Sloan. And who's she? No one. She nodded. And then she walked away. Into the trees. Into nowhere. That night, I went home and told Abby it was over. She didn't say anything. Just hugged me and went to bed. The news reported the death as an accident. A freak fire. No foul play suspected. DNA tests came back inconclusive. The body too burned. They said it could be months before anything definitive could be stated. But the funeral had already been held. The obituary already published. The death certificate filed. Rachel Hughes no longer existed. And I never looked for Martha Sloan.